I came across, I was reading this week that 90% of Americans believe that right now we're facing a mental health crisis. This was in a recent poll. 90%, I actually did not know it was possible for 90% of Americans to agree on anything, but they seem to agree on this, that we are experiencing a mental health crisis. And we understand why people would say that. We look at the news about drug addiction and suicide rates. We hear frightening stories of teenage rising in anxiety and hopelessness. And we see it, that there is a mental health crisis going on. But of course, the question that is regularly asked is why? And probably we've all heard multiple different explanations or theories as to why that is. There's the economic theory that there's many people who are kind of in a bad economic situation with an inability to be able to move out of that. There's also the concern that right now, there's just so much bad news, so much polarization, that politics is so discouraging. And more recently, there's been more and more of an emphasis on the idea that perhaps technology, smartphones, and social media have also contributed to this rising sense of anxiety and hopelessness that is pervasive within our society. And I suspect all of those have some truth to them. But I want to propose that maybe there's also something else in addition to this. Could it be that at least part of the reason that our culture, our society is struggling in this way is that we don't know where we're going? It seems to me that to be able to just live, we need to have a sense of purpose. Our life needs to mean something, right? Hope is this idea that there is something good that we're moving towards, and that's what gives us energy. We need that for a society to be healthy and to live well. We need this collective sense of purpose, a project in some ways that we are working towards. We need to know where we're going, and I don't think we do. Do you? I think of how in our news or in political speeches, what we hear again and again is how bad everything is. That person's bad, that person's hypocritical. There's so much rage and anger, but how often do we actually hear someone idealistically saying, and this is what we need? Or we see it even in our art, in the stories that we tell. Have you noticed that we don't seem capable of telling new stories anymore? We just reboot the old ones or have sequels or have these tired franchises. There's very little that's fresh and even less that's hopeful. We're stuck. We don't know where we're going. And if we as a society are aimless and purposeless and don't have any sense of anything better that we're moving towards, is it any wonder that there is so much anxiety and hopelessness? So in light of that, I think it's significant that when we look at God's instructions to his Old Testament people, he provided a way that was specifically designed to answer this need. In God's law and his instructions to Israel, he provided them with a practice that was meant to form them so that they would understand where they were going. He gave them a sense of direction by calling them to a journey. 3 times a year, Israelites were invited to make a pilgrimage. And each time, people from all over the country would leave their villages and join with each other, and along the way find more people. Imagine kind of like a Wizard of Oz. People keep on joining the group, and they were all collectively joining to go to one place, to the city of Jerusalem. But, and this is important to understand what's going on here, in their minds, in their imagination, in the ways that they spoke, in the songs that they sang, it wasn't just to Jerusalem they were heading. They were going to Zion. Now, what's the difference, you might ask? Well, Jerusalem was a city, like Chicago or New York, a city that was loved by the people, but a city nonetheless. But Zion is more. Zion is a symbol. Zion was an ideal. Zion is a vision of something that is not yet, but God has promised will one day be. It's a vision of a city where all is made right, where God lives with his people and his people delight in God and there is perfect fellowship and joy, where there is justice and security, and there's no one who's on the outs, who are in the underbelly of the city, but rather all are able to flourish and participate, where there is security without crime so that kids can play outdoors until late at night, that no one need ever lock their doors. Neighbors enjoy meals with neighbors. It is a city in this vision that is without fear and full of joy. Zion, if you will, is an image, a vision of where God is making things move towards. It is the destination. Yes, of course, that is not how things are right now. Our sin has so utterly fractured and broken things, but God has said, I will not let it stay this way. He has committed himself to making all things right, to taking the slums filled with poverty and the broken windows and the graffiti of our cities and to make it again into something beautiful, into Zion. In a single word, we are capturing what God is intending to do in the world. You might call it Project Zion. And when God, again and again, invites his people to leave their villages and journey to Zion as they speak and as they think, he is instilling them a sense of purpose. This, he is saying, is where you're going. Not just to that geographical location, but it was supposed to evoke something in their imagination. This is our goal. This is what life is about. This is where human history is moving towards. It's all moving towards Zion. That is what life is about. And in a sense, even as they were journeying, actively moving there, they were given the sense that their job was in some ways to participate in this movement, to somehow be a part of this world moving towards Zion. And as they moved, like every good road trip, there is music. Of course, this is pre-Spotify, so it's not listening to something, it was music that they sang. If you've ever wondered when sometimes you come across the Psalms and you see these Psalms that are called a song of ascents, these are the songs that the people sang when they were making a pilgrimage. As people were moving towards Jerusalem, moving in their imagination towards Zion, together they would sing these songs, this 15-song set, 5 sets of 3, carefully organized, where each of the sets follow 3 key ideas. They begin in the first of the set of the psalm with a sense of a problem. There is something we are opposing. There is something wrong with this world. And then the second psalm in the set moves to a pathway. Here's how we go where we're going. And it concludes with a purpose. Here is Zion. Here is where we want to be. And as they sing these songs, focusing on the purpose and the problem and the pathway, they have more and more of a sense in their lives of what their lives are about, what they are seeking to oppose, how they are seeking to walk, and where they are seeking to go. Again and again, they are given a sense of their story, of their purpose, of their collective journey. They are to participate in Project Zion. Now, I bring that up this morning, not because we are called to make pilgrimages. That is something that is of the Old Testament time, but because even so, Project Zion, very clearly in the New Testament, continues. In fact, Hebrews explicitly tells us that through the death and resurrection of Jesus, there now awaits for us a perfect city built by God. And we are told, actually, in Hebrews 12, that we are to set out on a journey, that we are to strengthen our weak knees, that we are to find the path for walking, that you and I, and in fact anyone, our fundamental calling is to journey through Christ Jesus to Zion. It doesn't matter whether you even right now identify yourself as a follower of Jesus or not. The same holds. Our purpose, what you ultimately are for and you are called to, is join in this journey of moving towards Zion. which I realize feels rather abstract, and it's not really clear even what I mean by that. Which is why I want to spend the next 3 weeks looking through or considering one of those triads of songs of the Songs of Ascents. To listen as, and actually in our hearts even to join in with these songs that are marching songs that are meant to help us to understand the journey that we are on, the story that we're a part of. In a couple of weeks, we'll look at Psalm 131 and consider what it is we're for, what the goal is. And next week in Psalm 130, we will consider the pathway and what it looks like. This morning, though, as we begin with this, we will consider the problem. Because that's what Psalm 129 wants us to consider. The problem that we are facing as we set out on this journey. And my hope is that as we go through these, we will have a better sense of what life is about and where we're going. So as we turn to our passage, Psalm 129, one of these songs of ascents, we see from the very outset that what we face is an enemy who is directly opposed to Project Zion. Have you ever wondered why it just seems so hard for human societies to ever get things right? I mean, just think about it for a moment. We've had literally thousands of years and many governments across the world that can maybe one time find a way to have a society that's just, where all people are content and that lasts, and we've tried again and again, and we never do it, right? I mean, like you look at ancient nations and just how utterly cruel they were to anyone other than their race, or people talk about the greatness of Rome, but the greatness of Rome was on the back of slaves that it was established. Or even America, which has so many things to be thankful for. We think about the problems we know of. We talked about the drug addiction. We talk about issues with poverty and the political polarization. Why is it that no matter how many times we've tried, I mean, you'd think about it over thousands and thousands of years, sometime someone would have figured it out? Well, our psalm says there is something that is going on that is deeper than what we can see. There is a force at work that seeks to oppose God's good work of making things right. It starts just kind of jumping right in verse 1. Since my youth, they have often attacked me. And the me here is not just an individual talking about what happens to him. Notice the next thing it says is, let Israel say. This is Israel's song. This is the song of the people of God. From our youth, for generation to generation to generation, they have kept on attacking me. And who is they? Well, if we continue on a little bit more, we see in verse 5, they are those who hate Zion. They are those who are opposed to the work of God of making all things right. And they are described in the previous verse simply as the wicked. Now, many centuries later, when Paul writes about these, what opposes us along the way, he tells us something that's implicit already here, and that is, we're not talking about a specific bad guy or group of bad people. If we're talking about Israel's story where from generation upon generation people keep on opposing them, then it's not just one group of people, because there's all sorts of nations involved. There's something more going on. Paul says it's not flesh and blood that is ultimately our issue. There are powers, there are spiritual forces, Satan and his minions, who are seeking to oppose. And what they are opposed is the work of Zion. They are opposed, but they are opposed in a very specific way. They are opposed in a way that exploits. So we have in verse 3 a very fairly gruesome image. Plowmen plowed over my back. They made their furrows long. And I think we're meant to imagine the people of Israel just made prostrate on the ground while people with plows just drive ridges in their back upon back and sow their own seeds, seeking to kind of gain from that. It's a terrible image. It's an image of slavery, right? It's an image of exploitation. Even as this evil seeks to oppose and hurt the people of God, it also seeks to benefit from it. That is, what we see here when evil is being depicted is a desire to take the good things of God and yet reject God himself. So when they say, from my youth, people have done this to me, they have done this to me, almost certainly we're supposed to be thinking of the very beginning of Israel's story. We're supposed to be thinking of Egypt, where we first see this really happening. If you know much about the story of Israel, you know that it kind of begins when Jacob, whose name changes to Israel, and his family moves to Egypt because of famine. And then over generations, God blesses them. He fills their family with life so that children are born and more children are born until they become this great nation, a sign of God's blessing where he is working through them to ultimately bring about his good purposes. And we see Pharaoh, who is the leader of Egypt, who is watching this take place at a certain point after a certain number of generations, looking, and he doesn't go, this is amazing, look at how good God is. No, he says, this is not good. Pharaoh is threatened. And in Pharaoh, we see the way that evil generally works. Evil wants to maintain control, which means evil is always threatened by God's good purposes to bring his rule about. But what does Pharaoh do in response? Pharaoh doesn't just say, be gone. And he doesn't even just try to kill them, although he does do that by seeking to kill the infants that are born. No, he doesn't just want to stop them, he wants to exploit them. Here we see a whole lot of labor. Here we see a whole lot of life. He wants the good things that God has done without God himself, and so he seeks to make Israel his slave. And this is a picture of what opposes us. They have attacked me, and they have sought to plow my back. They have sought to exploit me. It's not just something that we see in the past. If we wanted to look to see how evil is at work today, we see signs of that very same tendency. I want to use a few examples, all of which in and of themselves are fairly minor, but point to this seeking to both oppose and yet use. Do you know that Harvard University's initial motto is truth for Christ and his church because it was initially established for the sake of training pastors? Or do you know that Rush Hospital used to be Rush Presbyterian Hospital? Or you can think of, like, not too far from here in Oakland, there's Christ Hospital. Why do you think we have these things going? What we see here is in people who have been changed by Jesus, wanting to express good things, wanting to bring about truth, wanting to bring about mercy, wanting to bring about healing. And those things, society says, yes, we want those, but we'd rather not have the Christian part of it, thank you very much. Or think about human rights. Human rights is something that comes from Christianity, from this understanding that we all belong to God and are made in his image. And our culture's like, yes, we want human rights. This is good. But could we remove the belonging to God and made in his image part? Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying there's any one individual who maliciously says, yes, let's stop this. What I'm saying is there is this deeper force at work that wants to basically benefit from the good things of God, but at the same time thwart what God is doing, thwart his purposes to bring about his good city. And the song that we are invited to sing with the people of Israel is the song that declares this. From my youth, they have often attacked me. They have sought to plow my back. And we probably ask at this point, okay, why do we sing this song? Not only is this a song that I've already said is one of the songs of ascent, so it's expected that as people are marching to Zion, they are singing this song about the power of the enemy, but notice they're actually explicitly called to say this. So it says, since my youth they have often attacked me, let Israel say. This is what we should be saying. It says, why? And I think the answer is fairly simple. If you are going to set out on a journey, you need to know the obstacles that you're going to face. More than know about it, you need to be ready for what you will face so that you can overcome it. And that's what this song is doing. This song is being realistic, isn't it? Rather than romanticizing this pathway to move towards Zion, this participation in Project Zion, it's saying this is going to be hard because there is a force at work that is sometimes manifest in people, in government, in other things that are going to seek to stop us, that hate the idea of Zion. There's a realism there. But if you notice, there isn't just a realism. There's also a defiance. Let Israel say, since my youth they have often attacked me, but they have not prevailed against me. Yes, plowmen plowed over my back, they made their furrows long, but the Lord is righteous, and he has cut the ropes of the wicked. Do you hear it? Do you hear the defiance? Yes, this is an honest song about what we will be opposed by, but it is also a fight song, a song of resistance, a song of audacity saying we will not be suppressed by what seeks to do this. It moves forward to anger, where it speaks of how terrible the evil is and it's seeking its downfall. It's a prayer to God of anger. Let all who hate Zion be driven back in disgrace. If they're going to plow into our backs and sow seed, may that grass that springs up be nothing. May they see their downfall. Can you imagine, as people are marching together, people who might not even have known each other but now are joining in as they're singing this song, and all of their frustration where they've experienced things going wrong, where they've experienced opposition, just comes out as they're singing, from youth we have been attacked, but they have not prevailed against us. It's a song meant to galvanize. And I would suggest that is why you and I are meant to sing it as well. I've already said that our calling is, as those who follow Jesus, to be moving towards the great city of Zion. And this song alerts us to the reality that this is not going to be easy. You will, if you seek to follow Jesus faithfully, experience opposition. You will experience things that will be tremendously difficult. From youth, you will experience in different ways attack, but there is a call here to join with the people of God in resilience. But what does that mean? What does resilience look like? Well, sometimes in some contexts, we know if we know anything about the persecution of the church, it means remaining faithful in the face of great physical suffering. Paul describes it in 2 Corinthians when he says, we are afflicted in every way, but not crushed. We are perplexed, but not in despair. We are persecuted, but not abandoned. We are struck down, but not destroyed. Do you hear it? He is singing in his own way, they have attacked me, but they have not prevailed. And sometimes, in some situations, that is the Christian calling. But I would suggest for many of us, the way that we will experience opposition is sometimes subtler. It's not in the direct physical pain. It is in the way it is powerful yet subtle temptation where evil seeks to thwart us, to move us off the path. If you are one who has sought to follow Jesus, from your youth you will experience opposition, though you will not recognize it as such at times. There will be ways where you will be taught that all of these other things are so important, whether it's school or extracurricular activities or other things that so consume your attention that church and involvement in church will just seem secondary. And then college comes that's even busier and there's so much to do and it's just something that you don't get around to. And then when we get to our adulthood, well, there's the next thing that we need to do to be able to get the promotion, and there's these major projects that we have to work on in our home, and we need to have time with our family away on vacation, all of which are good things, but somehow collectively they combine There's a reason that Jesus says when he speaks about the four soils that there are some who will hear the gospel and actually believe, but the priorities of this age, the desires of this world, and the cares and the deceptiveness of wealth will all conspire to choke their faith so that it never becomes fruitful. So that at the end of life, people are left wondering, what was that about? Where was I even going all along? But that, as we sing, is not our way. Our song is a song of resistance, a song of fight, a song of recognizing with anger that this is not the way, that our way is the way of following Jesus faithfully as we seek to move towards Zion. Now, I need to clarify something because, as I say, it's a fight. It can almost sound like it's just a matter of finding the pluck within you and finding that willpower, and no matter how much you're facing it, just keep going. And that's a misunderstanding. There's a swagger to the psalm. Hopefully you've noticed. There is a swagger to it, but the swagger is not, we are so much better than them. No, the swagger, I don't know if you've ever tried to feign confidence where you're trying to pretend that, hey, I'm pretty great, but deep down you know it's not. At least for me, it's very hard to sustain. That's not what's going on here. There is a confidence that is entirely justified. You notice when he says, they have not prevailed against me, the counterpart is the next two verses. Plowmen plowed over my back, they made their furrows long, but the Lord is righteous. He has cut the ropes of the wicked. I have swagger because I know I'm not by myself. I can have confidence that I will prevail because I know that the God of the universe is righteous and he is with me. And so if you notice what he does in the next verses, when there is this anger and this frustration with evil, it's not, we're going to attack it, we're going to overcome it. It's a prayer. Cause them to be thwarted. Do not let them succeed. We look to you, O Lord, and because we look to you, we can be confident in this moment. That is where the resilience comes from. The resilience that we're called to in the face of opposition is not just try harder and be bold. It's cling to God and know that he is the one who will bring you through this. Again, if we think of how Paul puts it, we read Paul saying, we are more than conquerors. How? Through him who loved us. We are able to prevail in the greatest of opposition, whether it's through suffering or temptation, not on our own, but through him who loved us. Which is the conviction of this psalm, which is what we are singing when we're singing it. Although I want to suggest that what Paul says here points us to something even more than what the psalmist was able to recognize. When Paul says we are more than conquerors through him who loved us, yes, he is speaking of God, but in his mind he is especially thinking of what he has seen through Jesus. You know, one of the things that I was taught a number of years ago that I found tremendously helpful when reading the Psalms is to recognize that the one who sings these songs more beautifully than we ever will is Jesus himself, and to imagine Jesus singing these songs. Because he truly did. He would have been one who regularly made the pilgrimage to Zion, and he would have joined in with the crowd singing the songs along the way. And I wonder if when he came to Psalm 129, there was a resonance in his soul that was unlike when anyone else was singing it. From my youth they have attacked me, but they have not prevailed against me. Because he knew what that would mean. We've spoken about evil's tendency, about how evil wants to take the good things and yet thwart what God is doing. And there is no time that we see that more clearly than in the life of Jesus. When Jesus is healing, when Jesus is feeding, there is much rejoicing and acceptance. But when Jesus proclaims the kingdom of God, there is a sense amongst those who are most threatened that he must be opposed. There is another song that the prophet Isaiah tells us that was a song of Jesus, a song that actually is very similar to the one that we're reflecting on now. It's called one of the servant songs. And in this song, we imagine Jesus singing it. I gave my back to those who beat me. I did not hide my face from scorn and spitting. Yet, the song goes on to sing, I have set my face like flint. The Lord will help me, and I will not be ashamed. And if you're hearing those words and imagining Jesus singing them, you know what he is singing about. You know that opposition, where it took him, how Jesus literally was beaten and whipped. Ridges were put into his back. How he was mocked and spat upon and opposed in every way possible. And yet his direction never moved. No matter how much people sought to thwart him, he prevailed against them, being faithful in the call of God all the way to the cross as he was marching to Zion. And having died and risen again, he is now ascended to be seated at the right hand of God. And we are told that through his victory, Zion is now assured. It has been definitively established. And I reflect on this with you so that you can understand that when we're talking about this journey, when we're talking about this march, when we're talking about this opposition, we are never talking about doing this alone. This morning, I don't know where you're at. I don't know how this idea of us being in this joint project of seeking to go where God is leading us, whether that just feels confusing. Maybe you're like, I don't know what we're talking about. Well, Jesus says to you, don't worry. I'm the one who made Zion. Follow me. Or you might say, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I know myself. I don't feel capable. And when you talk about opposition and temptation, I know I'm not able to do that. Jesus says to you, that's okay. I've already gone there. I know the way, and I have endured everything, and I will bring you through it. Follow me. There is a journey. There is a purpose. There is a destination that God has set before us. But he hasn't just set it before us. He has come to be with us, to bring us there. And his invitation, even right now, is wherever we are, whatever we have done, to hear his call and to leave behind what we were holding on to before and to follow Jesus as he leads the way. And I'd like to invite us to respond even right now in prayer. Wherever you are in your spiritual journey, here's a chance for you to turn aside from the things that you've recognized is not what you want, to acknowledge where your failures are, and to take hold of the good promises of God. And I will lead us in prayer in a couple minutes' time.